Heavenly Father, we just come right now, Lord, and we just assemble together, Lord, just thanking you this day, Lord God, that you've made a day of rejoicing and a day of gladness. Now, Father, I pray that, Lord, as we come together, Lord God, to fellowship, Lord God, and to address issues and agendas, Father, I pray that the wisdom from above, your wisdom that is first pure, that, Lord, you would allow it to drop in our spirit, God. And Father, that we would come up with the answers from you, from your word, Lord God, because we know that there is nothing greater than you. And this we ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Tonight we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Zaya Johnson. Zaya is about to be a fourth grader at Houston Elementary, and she's an athlete. She loves playing soccer, and basketball is her favorite. She also enjoys school, and her favorite subject is reading. And Zaya has a big plan, and that is to lead the Lady Yellow Jackets to a basketball championship one of these days. Yeah, I think so. And she also aspires to be becoming a teacher. So Zaya, anytime you're ready to lead us in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Zaya. At this time, I would like to recognize Mr. Ronnie Cole, who is the immediate past president of the Denison Rotary Club, who has a presentation to make.
I do. Mayor and city council members and staff, I appreciate you putting this on the agenda tonight. We're here with some good news. As you know, Denison Rotary Club has been a part of this community for 104 years. And 4 years ago, we raised enough money, $100,000 worth to be exact, in order to put the playground equipment in the splash pad over at Forest Park. Today, it's my honor and privilege to present you with some more money. And I'd like the rest of the Rotarians to come up here and join me with this. And Chief Gudgel.
At this point in each council meeting, that is, time is set aside so that citizens may speak on behalf of any action item that is on the agenda. In order to speak, a request to speak card must be filled out and given to the city clerk prior to reaching this point in our agendas. So, Ms. Wallenstein, do we have any cards besides the two that you gave me for the public hearing? No. Then there will be no public comments in the meeting this evening. Item 4, consent agenda.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
There is a motion by Councilmember Hander and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Doty. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Item 5, public hearings, and we need to do item 5B before item 5A because they were backward on the agenda. So, item 5B, receive a report, hold a discussion, conduct a public hearing, and take action on an ordinance changing the zoning of parcel ID number 151505 and also known as 4801 South Highway 91, Denison, Texas, 75020, from light industrial to commercial, case number 2020-53Z. Mr. Medina.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you. So this item here, get this working. Here we go. The applicant is wishing to rezone the property from light industrial to commercial. The 2018 comprehensive plan shows this area to be in mixed commercial land type uses. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval on the 14th of July. Here's a survey of the existing property. As you can see, the building already exists. It has been constructed. Some of you might remember this as the old Calhoun's building. This project is part of a larger piece. It consists of two components. This first one is the rezone to change the property from light industrial to commercial, while the next item on the agenda is going to be a conditional use permit pending the approval of the zoning. It'll have one ordinance to do both of those components. Here's the property outlined in yellow. As you can see, it's currently adjacent to commercial properties. Here's an aerial of the photo along Texoma Parkway. And this is a public hearing, and I'm present for any questions that you may have.
Questions for Mr. Medina? This is a public hearing, and I have two cards of those who are wishing to speak on behalf of this agenda item. And we will begin with Barry Reed at 1600 Norwood, Sherman, Texas. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and thank you for letting me speak. My wife and I we've known Calhoun's for many, many years. I actually met my wife there. My family's here. Jake's back in the back. We're wanting to call this Jake's place. My son is autistic. And we both drove by this thing many times, and we were wanting to do something with it. So we're asking to open up probably one of the largest food truck parks in the nation. I am a commercial general contractor. I've been building hotels for 39 years. I'm also the general contractor for La Madeleine Cafes, Black Eyed Peas, Bill Chili's, and stuff like that. So what we've decided to do is just turn this into a family-oriented place. We do not want it to be categorized as a nightclub. We're going to have the same hours as restaurants. We want, the way I've had this designed in my head is the outside is going to have a large patio. We're going to have fire pits. We're going to have horseshoe pits. We're going to have cornhole games. We're going to have washers. We are going to serve alcohol. It's beer and wine only, and non-alcoholic beverages. The inside is, if you've been in Calhoun's, which I think everybody in Grayson County has been in there once, the inside is going to be completely redesigned. Dance floor is gone. We will have live entertainment on Saturday nights, but more than anything, it'll probably be someone that sits up and picks a guitar and just plays some music in this, a good atmosphere. We're wanting to hire local bands in the area. And the inside, back in the back, if you remember the place, there was pool tables. All of those are gone. Only thing I'm putting back there is games, cornhole games, washers, giant Jenga. We want the kids to be there. We want people to come there. We've got giant TVs going in there so you can watch the Cowboys hopefully win on Sundays. Also on the inside, we're doing a little small general store, kind of like a miniature Buc-ee's. So when you walk in there, you can buy jams and jellies and preserves and stuff like that. The inside is a large dining area. So how it works is the very back of the property, I've designed the parking lot. So you will park in the back, you'll come off Longhorn, you'll go in the back, you'll park, and you'll come in the entrance on the side of the building now. When you walk through, you'll see the general store, there'll be a big VIP area, which I'm calling a VIP area. I'm putting about 15 couches in there so you can sit down and lounge around and charge your phones and watch TV and enjoy. You'll go up if you want to get a drink before you go outside. You can go to the bar, get a drink, sit down, relax. When you're ready to go out, you'll walk out the main entrance where is the old entrance, and you'll be under a canopy. So we've taken the elements out of this. If it's snowing, sleeting, raining, you're under a cover. You'll walk to the food trailers, you'll place your order, you'll get a pager, you can go back and sit down, your pager goes off, you can you'll go back and get your food, you can go back inside or go out in about a 1,500 square foot patio. We're just trying to bring something back to Grayson County that people can go and sit down around and just have a really good time with your family and your friends. And again, I just want to express more than anything, we do not want this, and it will not be any type of like a bar or anything, a nightclub. It's not going to happen. Like I said, my son, this is for him. We're building it for Jake. He graduates this year from Whitesboro, and I've got my other sons, their businesses, and built them for him and got them going and stuff. But now it's Jake's turn, and so this is for him. I think I've met with the fire marshals. I've met with Bill Medina has just helped me so much in getting this thing moving forward and stuff. And I'm just hoping that we get a good vote and y'all allow me to put this in for Grayson County.
All right, thank you. Questions for Mr. Reed? No? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Reed, do you want to add anything to it? Okay, all right. Questions from council? Discussion? A motion?
Mayor, I move to approve the ordinance changing the zoning of the property located at 4801 South Highway 91, Denison, Texas, from light industrial to commercial zoning district.
Second.
There is a motion by Councilmember Hander and a second by Councilmember Adams. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Item 5A, receive a report, hold a discussion, conduct a public hearing, and take action on an ordinance for a conditional use permit for the use of a food truck park at Jake's Place, located at 4801 South Highway 91, Denison, Texas. Case number 2020-052 CUP. Mr. Medina.
Thank you all again. So this previous item was for the rezone, and now is the actual use part of this project, the conditional use permit. So as the applicant has explained, they're intending to do a food truck park that would also consist of some beer and wine sales and some live entertainment. Here's the subject property again, but as of a couple of minutes ago, this would be yellow instead of purple. Here's the outline property, here's the aerial. And here's the site plan. This is one of the major aspects of the conditional use permit that we worked really closely with the applicant on. We were really pleased to see this layout and this design. One of the big wins that I see here is not only is it going to be redeveloping an existing site that's currently vacant, but they're also putting in some landscaping along the front of the property. And what that does from a planning perspective is they're separating vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic. All the parking and pedestrian traffic's to the rear, while you're going to have that separation of vehicles and people because landscaping. So instead of throwing in a bunch of barriers, they decided to do some shrubs and some trees, which is really helpful, really dress up this site a little bit. They're also doing a lot of work on the inside. We were impressed by, of course, the fire marshal will be happy to know that they are doing a fire suppression system. They're repainting the building, they're removing the dance floor and putting in new seating. Here's the new layout on the inside. New lighting, outdoor additional seating, as they mentioned previously. They're redoing the floors, ceiling fans. The parking lot will be redone with new chip seal and then a fresh 24-foot asphalt fire lane, which was desperately needed there. Again, live entertainment will end by 11:30, and that's a component of the conditional use permit. That'll be in the ordinance. Let's see, Sunday through Thursday are their hours of operation, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., and then Friday, Saturday, 11 to 12. So Planning and Zoning recommended approval, Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval on the 14th as well. Here's a sample look of the type of atmosphere they're going with. However, I guess picture these people with masks on, and that'll give you a better idea. And this is the people social distancing. This is another example here. So we recommend approval, and this is a public hearing, and I'm present for any questions that you may have.
Questions for Mr. Medina? This is a public hearing. Mr. Reed, do you want to add anything? No, ma'am. Okay. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? There being none, the public hearing is closed. And Ms. Wallenstein, since I failed to close the public hearing on 5B, do I need to do that now? Okay, for the record, the public hearing is closed on 5B. Questions from council?
Thank y'all so much for choosing Denison for this project. You said it's going to be one of the largest in the nation. That means you had a lot of choices where you could put it, and we're awfully excited it's going to be here in Denison, especially on that corridor. I really think y'all's project is what's going to speed that whole corridor along.
No further discussion, a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve the ordinance for a conditional use permit for the use of a food truck park for Jake's Place located at 4801 South Highway 91, Denison, Texas, 75020.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Spiegel and a second from Councilmember Greenleaf. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Medina. Thank you, Mr. Reed. And thank you, Jay. Item 5C, receive a report, hold a discussion, conduct a public hearing, and take action on the joint 2020-2024 5-year consolidated plan and 2020 annual action plan. Mr. Medina?
Thank you again. So this item here is to hold a public hearing and act on our CDBG annual action plan and 5-year consolidated plan. Every year, Denison is an entitlement community deemed by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. So we receive federal funds every year to assist low to moderate income families or neighborhoods. And part of the requirement that HUD bestows on us is we need to plan how we're going to use that money. So this slide here shows over 5 years where, or the amount of allocated money we're expected to receive. For the 5-year plan, that's roughly $1.5 million. And for the annual action plan, this would be this upcoming fiscal year, we would receive $295,000. This table shows the proposed 5-year layout for the consolidated plan. Now this is an estimate. We just took an average of the previous 5 years and projected that out for the next 5 years. That could go up, that could go down. However, this is going to be about the proportions of where we'd like to spend those funds. We have money for, well, the plan hasn't really changed from the last 5 years. The only thing that we're really adopting is the use of public services funds. So we allocate, or we're proposing to allocate $125,000 for public services. This can include a wide range of services, childcare facilities, meal service providers. It's really broad in general, and as long as the city and the person or the organization receiving these funds can prove it's serving low to moderate income families or households, it's going to be eligible for CDBG. So it'll give us a lot of flexibility in the years to come. Especially with COVID, we want to try and build that flexibility in. And then this slide shows next year's plan. Right now, we're proposing about $30,000 for our minor emergency rehab projects. This is, repairing people's roofs or siding on their house, plumbing, water heaters, those sorts of things. Infrastructure, that's going to be our Section 108 loan that we use to cover street repairs that was previously done. We're just paying that loan back. Some code enforcement positions and administration and planning. A lot of work goes into administering this program. Now, to gather our sources here, in your packet, you'll see the surveys that were sent out to the public and received. We used federal and local data as well as those surveys to come up with these numbers and assess what our community needs were. So we recommend approval, and this is a public hearing, and I'm present for any questions that you have.
Questions for Mr. Medina? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on behalf of this agenda item? There being none, the public hearing is closed. Questions from council? Discussion? A motion?
Mayor, I move to approve the resolution adopting the Denison Consolidated Plan for CDBG Program Year 2020 through 2023, and Annual Action Plan for CDBG Program Year 2020 through 2021.
Second.
There is a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Doty and a second by Councilmember Crawley. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you again, Mr. Medina. Item 6A, receive a report, hold a discussion, and take action on a resolution amending resolution number 3953 regarding authorizing the city manager to waive and release the city's interest in mowing liens under certain circumstances. Mr. Rex.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll try to speak loudly so you can hear me through the mask. So we often get solicit feedback from our builders and developers in the community, and one question and opportunity that often comes up is how the city can continue to help them build on infill lots in our central area, our established neighborhoods. The city, who has really for the past 20-some years maintained a lot of these vacant lots, has a lot of mowing liens on the properties, and so we have tried to waive some of those liens to make it easier for people to build on the lots is really what it boils down to. Chris, can you go to the next slide, please? So in order to continue to change this program with the time, and I give an example here of 505 West Hull Street, we're proposing to reduce the sort of the threshold that we use to release mowing liens or reduce mowing liens on property. So again, the goal is to encourage redevelopment of vacant lots, and the proposed resolution would give us some more flexibility with being able to do that. So the example of 505 West Hull Street, in 2018, the tax value was $6,000, and 50% of that is $3,000. How the resolution is written is that if you take the outstanding property taxes plus the mowing liens, that number can't exceed 50% of the taxable value. That's how the current program is. We're proposing to reduce that to 25%, because as you can see on 505 West Hull, the tax value on most of these vacant lots is now upwards of $12,000 to $15,000. And so if we keep that 50% threshold, it's really just going to be a stumbling block to getting those properties redeveloped. So we're proposing to take that down to 25% on a $15,000 lot. That's going to put that threshold at $3,750, which is not too far off from where that number used to be, under the 50% reduction. And we think this will help continue to move lots and get some new affordable housing in our established neighborhoods. So that's the long and short of the program. It's been successful. You know, we're often asked, well, the city paid to maintain these lots for so many years. We need to capture some of that money back, and that's true. But really, what happens is, unless we help facilitate development here, we're not going to get any mowing liens, and we're going to continue to mow the property. So this really just gives us a little bit of revenue, and most importantly, it puts the vacant lots back in productive use. So overall, it's been a good program, and we propose that we keep moving forward with it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Rex? Discussion from council? A motion.
Mayor, I move to adopt the resolution amending resolution number 3953 regarding authorizing the city manager to waive and release the city's interest in mowing liens under certain circumstances.
Second.
There is a motion by Councilmember Crawley and a second by Councilmember Greenlee. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Item 6B, receive a report, hold a discussion, and take action on an ordinance considering all matters incident and related to the issuance, sale, and delivery of the City of Denison, Texas combination tax and limited surplus revenue certificates of obligation, Series 2020B, authorizing the issuance of the certificates, approving and authorizing instruments and procedures relating to said certificates, and enacting other provisions related to the subject. Councilmember Crawley needs to recuse himself from this item. Let the record show that the time is 6:27 and Councilmember Crawley left the dais. Ms. Wagner.
May I remove this? Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. That was long, wasn't it?
It was long.
The agenda item is long, but if you recall, during the fiscal year 2020 budget process, staff brought before council certain improvement projects and equipment for approval. Among the requests were waterworks and sewer system improvements based on our utility capital plan. And utility projects covered under this bond include, but are not limited to. We have a lot of projects, but I'm just going to go over some of the larger ones. Teresa water line, the secondary clarifier troughs. Utilities for street reconstruction projects, of course, going under the roads of Loy Lake and Floor Lane and Waterloo Lake Drive, and Grayson Water Tower and others. Street improvements are also part of this bond based on our street CIP, and those streets are going to be Floor Lane, Loy Lake Road, and Waterloo Lake Drive. On September 16th of last year, the council approved moving forward with improvement projects and equipment and adopted a reimbursing resolution at that time so we could move ahead before we issued bonds. Council approved ordinances in April for refunding of previous bonds, saved some money, lots of money, and for the West End Fire Station remodel and for a ladder truck for Denison Fire Rescue. We're now bringing to council all matters incident or related to the issuance, sale, and delivery of these 2020B bonds. $4.5 million for water and sewer and $7.2 million for street improvements. Staff is recommending approval of this ordinance, but before that, I would like to introduce Boyd. You've met Boyd before. He's with Hilltop Securities, and he's going to talk a little bit about the pricing that occurred today for these bonds for the city of Denison. I've cleaned it up for you.
Thank you, Renee, Mayor, members of the council. We had a bond sale today, and I wanted to talk quickly about the market. You've got my, excuse me, I think I just take this off because it's not going to survive. I think you have this sitting at your chairs, and just immediately behind is the bond buyer's index of 20 municipal bonds. And what this is showing is just, this is what the market has been doing. And you'll notice our latest was 209. 1981, we maxed out at about 13.75%. And since then, it's just been on a steady march down. and it's still on a steady march down. How low it can go, I don't know, but I just want to let you know the market is very cooperative today. And then if you go to page 1 on the numbers, we've got the sources and uses and funds. And you can see we sold $10,235,000 under the sources, total with 6.3 and 3.935 split between streets and water and sewer. For the project fund deposits, we have 11.7 million. 7.2 on the streets, 4.5 on the water, wastewater. And then behind that, on page 2, we've got the debt service. This is on an annual basis. So beginning next year, this is what you'll be paying, the $710,000. You'll notice we structured it on a level debt repayment obligation over 20 years. The interest rate that we received on that, and this is a true interest cost which takes into account the present value of money. So the true interest cost on this was 1.97%. And again, we're in territory that that we haven't been in fact, we're running right on 50-year lows in this market right now with those rates. Behind that, I've got the Standard & Poor's, and actually we have the Fitch rating right up too, but I'm just going to go over the Standard & Poor's. The city's rated AA- by Standard & Poor's and AA by Fitch. And the Standard & Poor's, actually both of them are very easy to read, but the Standard & Poor's write-up is something that I would recommend the council just spend a few minutes. It's got lots of room between the sentences and that type of thing, so it's something that I can read, but it'll go real quick. It's well written and it's very clear. They don't get lost in the jargon, so to speak. But the AA- and the AA are good ratings, and I expect with S&P that AA- will move up to a AA at some point in time. And we've got a couple things going against us. One, got this COVID stuff, and so they're being very cautious about any moves that they make. They might take some ratings down, but in Denison's case, it probably kept you from moving up. And another problem that you had were your results last year had a little bit of a deficit spending in the results because of the ran outside the budget. So we anticipate that will be right up. There was a lot of conversation about long-term financial planning, both debt and operations. So there's a lot of conversation, and that was one of the things that came out on the positive side. It was very obvious that the city was doing its homework moving forward, and it looked at not just COVID, but looked at all the impacts that the expenditures coming in the current year we're going to have. So the rating services were just very comfortable with Denison, and that's I've been working with Denison since the late 70s, and things were not always this way. But this is an excellent rate, excellent market, and this is something that we can recommend to the council for its consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from council?
Great.
We're just blown away. We're just very grateful.
Well, I'm in a business now, I'm getting blown away every day. And I'm getting to work at home and get blown away, but these rates are just fantastic.
Discussion from council. A motion?
Mayor, I move to approve the ordinance considering all matters incident and related to the issuance, sale, and delivery of City of Denison, Texas combination tax and limited surplus revenue certificates of obligation, Series 2020B, authorizing the issuance of the certificates, approving and authorizing instruments and procedures related to said certificates, and enacting other provisions relating to the subject.
Second.
motion by Councilmember Hander and a second by Councilmember Spiegel. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Councilmember Spiegel, will you invite Councilmember Crawley back to the dais? Thank you very much.
He's on his way.
The time is 6:36, and let the record show that Councilmember Crawley has returned to the dais. Item 6C, receive a report, hold a discussion, and act on approving the updated mission, vision, and values and leadership philosophy documents for Team Denison staff direction and development purposes. Mr. Rex.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to share with you tonight what some of the leadership work that our executive leadership team has done really since the first of this year. COVID slowed things down, and we had hoped to kind of roll this out a little differently than we are now, but appreciate Council's consideration of adopting this new mission, vision, values, and leadership philosophy. So rewinding the clock a little bit, back in 2012, the city did some strategic planning. Some of you may have been a part of that effort. And at the time, a core purpose and core values were created along with an organizational vision. And that's really when what we call STACY was born. STACY, our core values, stands for service, teamwork, accountability, commitment, and integrity. And this core purpose and core values that was adopted at the time really set the trajectory for the organization moving forward. And it's been a valuable direction for us, and certainly we want to kind of refresh it more than anything else. Fast forward to about 2015, the city did some high-performance organization leadership training. We took about 35 or so of our management and supervisors through a 3-day workshop on high-performance organizations, and a subset of that team came out and created a leadership philosophy, really to just define how we were going to behave as leaders and managers, and what we believed in people and the organization, and helped again set a trajectory for having successful leadership at the city of Denison. And so that was about 5 years ago. Fast forward to January of 2020, our executive leadership team had a 3-day workshop with a facilitator earlier this year, and really just did a deep dive into our core purpose and values and organizational vision, and decided that what we had was really good, just needed a little freshening up and probably simplifying. And so what came out of that this year was, Chris, if you'll flip to the next slide, is a revised mission, vision, and values and leadership philosophy. I'll start with the leadership philosophy because not a whole lot changed here. We reworded really just that first statement there. We believe Team Denison is our most important asset. Everything else is as it was approved in 2015, and really sets a very high standard and bar for our Team Denison leaders in our organization. So looking at the mission, vision, and values, what used to be a purpose, we've retitled as a mission, and made it something that's really memorable and catchy, delivering service that enhances our community. Pretty simple to remember for our staff members that need to better understand and kind of catch a glimpse of what their overall purpose and mission is. That's what we do on Team Denison. We deliver service that enhances our community. When you look at the core of what we do, that encompasses it all. The vision statement really is just a sort of pared down version of what we use often, and Mayor, you quote it quite a bit in speeches and any opportunity you get to talk about our vision. Really two key components of that are that we're a community of choice and that we have an exceptional quality of life. And so the vision that's been sort of shortened includes both of those. Denison is a community of choice that retains its hometown feel and historic character while attracting new residents, businesses, and visitors through an exceptional quality of life. So how we landed on this particular wording, one is that it included community of choice and exceptional quality of life, but it also included a lot of the other statements there about hometown feel, historic character, attracting new people to Denison. That came out of our comprehensive plan steering committee. Councilman Spiegel, you recall being a part of that, and Mayor as well, that comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2018, really provided some more clarity on that vision and talked about what we want to be as a community as we continue to grow. And it was about hometown feel and historic character. And so we wanted to make sure we incorporated that into the vision statement as well. And then on to the core values. They're the same: service, teamwork, accountability, commitment, and integrity. However, we did shorten the statements that accompany those core values. So I'll just read through those briefly, and you can see them there on your screen as well. Service: we conscientiously choose daily to enhance our community through dedicated service to others. Teamwork: we work together as Team Denison to carry out the mission and vision of the city while placing the needs of the organization above our own. Accountability: we take personal and collective responsibility for achieving shared goals. Commitment: we dedicate ourselves to persist in our endeavors to do what we say we will do, no matter the difficulty. And integrity: we commit to the highest standards of honesty and ethical conduct by doing the right thing and honoring our commitments. So that's what's before you tonight, and certainly as I lead the organization and work with our other leaders in the organization, this sets a very high standard for our team to accomplish, and I'm always pleased with how they're able to follow, I think, what the spirit of all this is, which is helping to create a great community, a community of choice with an exceptional quality of life. Asking that council formally adopt this, and this will replace our existing documents and allow us to share this with our staff and continue to work towards these things. This provides a good destination for us, but we are also an organization of people, and imperfect people at that, and so we know that this is a continual iterative process that requires persistence, and it's really about striving to accomplish these things. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Rex? Discussion from council? Well, I would just like to say that I greatly appreciate all the efforts that went into this. I know that when someone has the opportunity to help create the mission, vision, values, leadership philosophy, then they own it. And that's what's been good about this, is that the team owns it because they helped to create it. So, and I can probably unlearn the other vision and learn this one, Judge, so that I can continue to. Yeah, exactly. So, motion from council.
Mayor, I move to approve the updated Team Denison mission, vision, and values and leadership philosophy documents for staff direction and employee development purposes.
Second.
There is a motion by Councilmember Crawley and a second by Councilmember Spiegel. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you very much, Judd.
Thank you.
Project updates. Receive a report and hold a discussion regarding expenses, revenues, and other considerations regarding development of the fiscal year 2021 budget. Mr. Rex.
All right, I'm just going to keep on going here. This is great. So want to circle back to council. As you recall, we had a budget workshop at the end of June and have been hard at work developing the budget for fiscal 2021, which begins October 1st of 2020. Definitely want to thank our staff, especially our Finance and Administrative Services Director, Renee Wagner, who always takes a lead effort in helping to assemble the budget. But she has a lot of team members behind her that do a lot of work as well. We also have many discussions with our executive and management team, and this is definitely a team effort. So what I want to update you on tonight is just a real brief overview of kind of where we're at with the utility fund and the general fund. This first slide shows an update on the utility fund, and I include a couple extra columns here just since we've had so many changes to the budget since fiscal 2020 budget was adopted last year in September, that we want to make sure we kind of track that and see how things are progressing from that front. At the last city council meeting, council adopted a revised fiscal 2020 budget, and so the middle column here indicates those respective expenses along with the revenue that we project. And then for fiscal 2020, just really a status update on how that fund is looking right now. So I called, and I told staff this morning, I call 2020 the lost year, because basically if you look at our revenue and expenses, it's kind of the same in 2021 as it was in 2020. We lost a year, and maybe we'll forget it at some point too, because it's been a rough year, right? If we're all honest with ourselves. So 2021 is looking good from a utility fund perspective. Our revenue is over our expenses right now, about $168,010. That's basically the money that we have available to put towards, to allocate towards projects, priorities for this next year, and I'll touch on a few of those tonight. Next slide, it shows the general fund. Again, 2020, what was originally adopted, and then our revised budget that was adopted last month. Those totals are shown there. We do project, and this is an updated number, it's changed really since March, since the pandemic began, what we project to finish fiscal year 2020 at. We're showing a shortage of about $189,000 right now. I hope that if our sales tax revenue continues strong for the next 2 months, that deficit will be erased, and that we'll end up about breaking even. This probably represents more of a worst case scenario than anything for the rest of the fiscal year. Looking at fiscal 2021, we're showing right now about $1.23 million that we have available to allocate towards projects and priorities, really fund the things that need to be funded. You'll notice that on the expense side, our total expenditures in the original 2020 budget were about $28.5 million. We've pared that back to $27.6 million, and give credit to our division and department directors for helping lead the effort to cut things back so that we end fiscal 2020 with at least a break even, if not a little bit of shortage. And so we really just carried that base budget that was presented through the pandemic from our departments, carried that over to 2021 and used that as our base budget. And so that $1.23 million is what's going to help build us back with some expenses and opportunities that are there to help move us forward in 2021. The next slide shows really where we want to make some recommendations and allocate some of those dollars that are available to us in fiscal 2021. Start with some of the personnel-related expenses. We would recommend moving forward with a 2% increase for our staff. We feel that the budget and the numbers that we're seeing now can accommodate that. In addition, would propose a couple new positions based on need in the departments and increased need for services and demand for services. Animal services officer and a communication specialist dispatcher in our 911 center is really what that is. And then the code compliance officer, this was a position that was authorized by council earlier this year, right before the pandemic hit. We never got an opportunity to fill that position, so we do want to go ahead and fund that position for next fiscal year so that we can kick off our rental registration program and keep that moving ahead. And then the recommendations also include some new grade assignments for some positions. Our employee services department worked with a consultant this past year to not only do a salary survey, but also just look into some of our grade classifications and positions, make sure that we were close to market on some of those. And so we are recommending for some positions in our dispatch center and some of our utility workers to receive some grade assignments and some additional shifting in their pay on that perspective. Parks and Rec Department took some of the more drastic cuts to expenses during the pandemic, due in large part to they couldn't do a lot during the pandemic. So they scaled back their programs and activities and even had made plans to cut out some key programs such as Denison on Ice, maintenance, landscaping, that sort of thing. And so we want to restore those programs back into the budget, and we're excited to do that. Still going to look a little different for Parks and Recreation next year. Ask them to just still plan that there's going to be a pandemic and that we can't do a lot of the things that we typically would do. But they have been very creative and kind of repurposed themselves, done some creative things to help keep us moving forward. So we want to restore some funding on those as well. Really two other key things that are recommended to be placed in the budget this year. This will be our third year in the enterprise fleet leasing program. And so we want to keep the momentum we've built up in replacing and updating our fleet with implementing year 3 of that program. That's about $120,000 from general fund and $15,000 in utility fund added. We are still making some lease payments on the years 1 and 2 vehicles that were replaced as well. This is in addition to those. And then the public safety radio infrastructure, basically from our dispatch center all throughout our communication system, we need a complete upgrade. This has been on our radar for several years, and we feel we're in a good position to pull the trigger on this, and the timing's right to get this work done and upgrade us to the new technology that's out there. So it's a pretty significant hit. This is $1.1 million that we would finance over several years so that we can get that project done and implemented and start moving forward on that front. So really, if you kind of look at the dollars behind all these recommendations, they basically eat up what we have available to allocate, both from the general fund and utility fund for next fiscal year, and feel confident making these recommendations now. I think I have one more slide, Chris. Yes. Also in our budgeting for next year, just wanted to share what we're projecting for our 3 TIRZ districts and what those contributions are going to look like. TIRZ number 1, Gateway Village, between the city and county contributions, it'll be close to $400,000. TIRZ number 2, which has not had any construction activity, a little bit of increment from property values going up, but not a whole lot there. And then our downtown TIRZ continues to perform very well, and we feel confident that we can continue moving ahead with our phase 1 of the D3 project based on what we were seeing in past years and what we have saved up, and then what we're seeing for property values next year. So with that, happy to answer any questions, but other than kind of what I presented tonight, the budget's pretty simple and no frills this year. So the only 2 kind of outstanding items that we still have to present later to council will be in our capital funds. As you recall, in the general capital fund, we take 5% of our sales tax revenue, set that aside for equipment and one-time capital expenses. On the utility fund side, we do the same thing with our water sales, 5% of our water sales. So there's about $700,000 between those 2 that we have to allocate needs that departments requested. So that's the one thing that we have not done yet. We'll do that over the next couple weeks and then come back to City Council with some recommendations on those equipment purchases and capital purchases as well. So again, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Mr. Rex?
Would you recommend that we shop local?
Absolutely. And Renee would also recommend that anywhere within city limits.
And she would highly recommend that we all water our yards.
Yes, yes. And
Get
shop
those
online.
water sales up.
Shop online.
All right. Well, that was an information item only and does not Item 7B, receive a report from the Denison Fire Chief regarding a general overview of the Denison Fire Rescue. Chief Lloyd.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I'm going to go through this presentation just for the purpose of trying to give you guys a little bit of insight into kind of what goes on behind the business of emergency services delivery. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and we do things a little bit differently than some of the other services in the city, so we want to kind of clarify some of that. As I go through this, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt as I'm going through it, and then at the end I'll stop and we'll address any questions that you might have at that time. We're going to kind of go over a little bit of a historical perspective, and then we'll go through some infrastructure stuff, kind of the anatomy of a call, and that's kind of why we make responses like we do, some of the government entities that regulate us, and sort of some of the reasoning behind why we do what we do. We'll go through our hiring process, our civil service hiring process. We'll touch on what we do to prepare for a call, which is the training element of what we do. Then we'll kind of walk you through a call from a 911 call and kind of how it works through our system of communication, our dispatch center, and how it gets out to us, and then once it gets to us, what we do with it. Then we'll kind of touch on what we do before that next call, because there's some things after the call we have to get prepared for. Kind of look into our future a little bit, and then we'll do a little SWOT assessment at the end about what we're facing moving forward into the future. First of all, the historical perspective, one of the big questions we get a lot of is just why do we work a shift schedule? There's not very many other businesses, entities that do that 24 on 48 shift schedule, and that actually originated back in the 1800s when big cities were starting to see a need for actual full-time fire service and not just people coming with buckets to help them out. And they didn't have any money to pay for it, and so they offered housing as a trade-off that attracted a young male clientele, which was very beneficial to the physical aspect of the firefighting back then. And so they would offer that housing. So that's actually how it evolved from there into a shift schedule. So they would work actually days instead of hours. It's one of the reasons why you hear it called a firehouse, is back to those roots. Here in Denison, there's a little bit of information on us. We were founded in 1876. We've had 4 line of duty deaths. Those are pretty impactful on a department. It's a pretty old department, so 4 is probably about average. Interesting, we hired our first female firefighter in its 141-year history in 2017. She's still with us today. Firefighters are kind of unique in that, like I said, we spend a third of our lives living with each other, so it creates a little bit different bond than you might see in a typical 40-hour work week. A lot of families intermingle and do things off duty, so it's an interesting element to our schedule. Some of the things we're doing to kind of make history, because they'll look back on us and kind of comment on what we're doing now. There's been some pretty significant shift in the way that we fight fires, and we've implemented some of those things. A whole lot more scientific approach than what we did in the past, which was just an experience-driven, handed-down kind of approach. We're exploring all different models of our service delivery, medical service delivery, public education to try to continue to improve our service to the citizens. We are also exploring innovative ways to try to recruit and retain employees, as that continues to be a challenge for us. The infrastructure of the fire department, like I said, we have shifts. We have 3 shifts, A, B, and C. We work a 24-hour schedule on and 48 off, so they work every 3rd day. Another interesting thing, we schedule our leave time a year in advance. So on 3 days, 1 for each shift in December, which are blocked out on our calendar so you can't schedule off, we sit down and schedule everybody's leave time for the entire year. That's done so that we can plan out coverage and make sure that we have staffing. Another interesting thing's kind of unique to the fire service, we can also do something called trade time, so we can swap shifts. So that gives us some flexibility. So if I'm supposed to work on Tuesday and you're supposed to work on Wednesday, we can just trade. You can work on Wednesday and Tuesday and swap it back and forth. And that's done in a separate system that accounts for that, so that we don't have someone get lopsided with owing someone a whole lot of time that they might not be able to make up in a little shorter period of time. Denison has 42 frontline shift personnel that provide the 24/7 service from 3 different stations. And on each one of those shifts, there's a battalion chief, which makes 3 total battalion chiefs, and then there's 3 stations. Each one of them has a captain, and he supervises that station, which puts us at 9 captains. And then there's an engineer that's required to drive the engine, so there's 9 of those, 1 at each station, for 3 shifts. And then we have 21 firefighter paramedics that fill out the rest of the assignment. And like I said, the battalion chief supervises the shift, and the captain supervises that specific station. We have 14 total members on each shift. 11 of those are our minimum staffing. And something that's a little unique with us, minimum sounds like the minimum, but we actually run at minimum staffing most of the time. And that's to facilitate all the vacation leave time and all that stuff that everybody has. That's, again, sort of a little backwards with the way other agencies set up, but that's very common throughout the fire service. Most of the time, fire services will always run at minimum a bulk of the time. So we set our minimum at, this is, we have to have this to get by, and that's where we run. That's an efficient place to be, and that's what we hit most of the time. DFR has 3 stations, cover the central downtown area, and then west and south side assignments, and that covers the rest of the city. We have an engine and a medic and a brush truck at Station 1 and 2. The engine has the officer ride on it. He rides on the right-hand side as a passenger. Engineer drives, firefighters in the back. And the medic that's at the station has a paramedic and an EMT staffing it. We also have brush trucks at all 3 stations, and those are staffed on demand. So if we have a grass fire or wildland fire, then the engine personnel will get over on the grass truck or brush truck, and then they'll go to that call. Station 3 is a little different. That's where the command vehicle is, which is the vehicle the battalion chief rides in. And then also we have a ladder at Station 3. And again, same staffing. The captain rides on the seat of the ladder, and then we have an engineer that drives it. He's got a little bit different training because he's not only trained in pumping and engine, but he's also trained in aerial. A little information on the engines and the quints and stuff. So the engine is a water pumping apparatus. They pump about 1,250 gallons a minute. They carry around 500 gallons on board. They can vary back and forth. Carry about 132 feet of ground ladders, rescue tools, and medical supplies. And that's an engine, sometimes called a pumper. Then you have a quint. So a quint is a hybrid between an engine and a ladder truck. So really, you can think of it as an engine, but it also has an aerial on it. Usually they're a shorter aerial, 75 to 95 feet, but it also does all the things that a pumper will do. It carries water, usually not quite as much, carries rescue tools, ground ladders, and has some medical supplies. The brush truck, it usually, and we have one at each station, it pumps water at a higher pressure but a lower volume. So the engines they need a lot of water for big fires. Grass trucks, brush trucks, they pump a higher pressure and a lower volume so that it lasts longer, so there's not as much water that's needed for typical grass fires to extinguish. Then we have the ambulance, the medic. It's a mobile intensive care unit staffed with paramedics and EMTs, and it can intervene in very, very advanced medical situations. So it carries a lot of medication on it, a lot of high-tech equipment, and the members are trained to intervene in emergent medical situations, and sustain that for a certain period of time. They carry frontline drugs that can really take someone for a pretty good amount of time till they can get to the hospital. So that can take care of someone and pretty much give them anything they can get in the hospital for 40 minutes of a transport. So as long as you're within that timeline, you're pretty much getting everything in the back of that medic that you would get if you were sitting in the hospital. The command vehicle that the battalion drives is staffed with the battalion chief. It carries all the communication equipment, sort of extra radios, some rehab supplies. That unit is used and dispatched on incidents that involve multiple companies, 2 engines or something like that, and that's a requirement. We have to abide by the National Incident Management Framework, which allows for command to be set up in more complex incidents for safety issues. And we have to abide by that or we become ineligible for any grants that we might want to get through the Department of Homeland Security and stuff. So that vehicle is designed specifically for that, to provide some supervision on those more complex incidents. We have some other vehicles, fire inspector vehicles, a utility truck. We have a big communications trailer if we have to have a command center for longer duration incidents. We have an old 1942 engine that we use for parades. It's currently in need of a little bit of repair right now, but we've got that on our radar to fix up. So that's kind of the infrastructure and kind of what we have. You have any questions on just kind of what we use to go on these calls? Okay. So anatomy of a call, this is going to give you a little bit of breakdown. We made about 5,700 calls in 2019. 360 of them were county calls, 5,340 of them were city calls. Of those calls, 162 were fire, 4,690 were EMS or motor vehicle accident calls. 639 were other, which would be fire alarms, lift assist, public assist, good intent calls, things like that. And then we had 198 calls that were canceled en route. So we started and then something canceled them en route. Our average response time was 6 minutes, 50 seconds for the city and 12 minutes, 48 for the county. The prevention side, which they actually have assignments as well. So we have about 938 commercial occupancies in our database. That changes constantly because an occupancy is just a business. So one goes out of business, two more come in business, start a business rather, it changes. But of those approximate 938, our prevention department did 423 inspections, and those are initial inspections, not counting re-inspections. And then we do about 300 pre-plans. And a pre-plan is when the fire company, the station, goes to a business in their district, and they pre-plan the occupancy. They look at it and see where the hazards are, make notes, put it in our dispatch software so that when we get a call to that particular occupancy, we have some alerting as to what's there, any hazardous chemicals, any difficulty with access, anything like that. So that's a very beneficial thing for us. They also did about 40 hours of public education, outreach to the citizens. The licensing agencies, there's a couple that deal with us. One is the fire side, one is the EMS side. So the Texas Commission on Fire Protection is the fire side, and that is the state regulatory agency that licenses us, addresses our CE requirements, also provides inspections. So they do every 2 years a surprise inspection to make sure we're in compliance. And then the other one is the Department of State Health Services, DSHS, and that's the medical side. So they're regulatory authority for that. And they handle licensing of the paramedics, EMTs. They also interface with the requirements we have. The EMS operates with standing orders from a doctor. So when we're providing care to a patient from an EMS perspective, those are all standing orders from a doctor, and that interface between the paramedics and the doctors and the standing orders, DSHS is the regulatory agency over all that. So they have requirements about QAs and how we review our calls, any deviations in protocols, all that falls under the purview of the State Department of Health Services. And then we also have some sort of standards, consensus standards that affect us that aren't always requirements. Sometimes the commission will actually adopt them and codify them, and then that actual consensus standard then becomes an actual law and requirement for us in the state of Texas. But there are some that they don't codify. We watch them and pay attention to them and try to be aware of them, because even though they're not law, if something were to happen, they are the consensus standard for the country. And so you get held against that standard. So if we weren't doing something for financial reasons or whatever that would meet that standard, we try to be aware of it and at least have an explanation as to why we can't physically or economically meet that standard. So we try to mitigate that potential liability if there were to be an accident or a lawsuit or something like that. NFPA 1710 deals with the suppression side of things and how we deploy and how we staff the fire department. The the Texas Department of Insurance, the Fire Marshal's Office, they're an oversight piece with ISO, the Insurance Service Office. ISO is a system of grading municipalities on their public protection classification. So they'll give you a number, 1 through 10, that tells insurance companies how efficient you are at mitigating fire, and for the purpose of pricing out home insurance and things like that. So again, not a requirement. Nobody's telling you have to do anything within the ISO metrics, but we do have a certain public protection class, and ours is 3 right now. If we don't do a certain amount of this, then we risk losing that classification. If it goes up, then homeowners insurance could go up. If it goes down, we could decrease it. So again, even though it's not a requirement, it's still very important that we pay attention to it and try to meet that metric so that we don't lose any of that. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so now let's talk about the kind of what we send on your emergency. We get a lot of questions about this. So, why there's so many vehicles? Why does a fire engine come to a medical call? So we get a lot of questions about this. So a quick rundown is that we do our best to try to put the appropriate resource with the emergency. However, we have a very dynamic business, so things can literally change completely 180 from the time we get dispatched and leave the station to the time we get there. So because of that, the system is set up to be extremely flexible, and therefore it's hard to answer that we're going to send this on every call. It just depends. It depends on the call. It depends on what else we have available. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But as a general rule, if you get a medical call, a serious medical call, you're going to get a fire engine and an ambulance. The engine crews are all certified paramedics, and then, of course, the ambulance paramedic and an EMT. The reason for that is because if it is a serious call that devolves into a CPR or something like that, and we don't send the fire engine, you've got one paramedic in the back with the patient to do everything. And to push drugs and do CPR is just impossible. So you just can't be efficient with that. So that's why the engine goes with the ambulance. The other sort of secondary reason for that is that back to the ISO, ISO does not really rate anything about your EMS service. It's only concerned with fire. And it really likes to see 4 people on an engine for full credit, which we economically can't afford. So if you put the 2 people on the medic that are with these 2 people on the ambulance, you get to sort of count them as 4 people. And so that's kind of a workaround and an explanation to why we can't economically just put that many people on an engine. But it still meets the criteria, the intent of ISO, so we get credit for it. So that's another kind of secondary reason for that. Most importantly, it's just for help. If your call happens to be a minor medical, then you could get just the ambulance. If it's pick somebody up kind of call, and it could be medical, it might not though, it doesn't sound like it. You might get a fire engine instead of a medic, and they might just go help somebody back in bed. And if it does evolve into a medical, well, I'm out of bed because I fell and I was dizzy. Oh, we didn't get that information. Then they call the ambulance and take care of it that way. Structure fires, you're gonna get everything in the city of Denison. You're gonna get the engines, the ladder, the ambulances, command vehicle, and if it's a significant structure fire, meaning it's gonna last a little bit longer than normal, it's difficult to put out, it's on a commercial structure, something like that, you're gonna get a administrative chief come as well to just support the command function of that call. So that'll give you 11 firefighters and 2 medical personnel for like a rehab. And then grass fires typically just get a brush and a truck and an engine and a brush truck. Engine for a water supply in case you're somewhere that can't readily get water to refill that tank if you run through your water. And rescue calls and other type calls, that is really there's a metrics in our computer-aided dispatch software, but it is really so dynamic that it's really difficult to put an absolute standard on that. That's really left up to the battalion chief to kind of tweak all that initial assignment to make sure he's going to get everything he needs, because that oftentimes involves other agencies, and he has to call and find out what's available. So that's a very dynamic dispatch, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the reason is. The other question we get a lot is just on the highway on motor vehicle accidents with the engines. You know, what's the engine doing there? And we put a lot of resources on a highway because that's where a lot of people run into problems with injuries and death while they're trying to mitigate that motor vehicle accident. It's a very, 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 very dangerous place for responders. So we take those big, huge fire engines that are heavy and loaded with water, and we bookend that incident to try to create some safety zones, some work zones, so that people can not worry about traffic and focus on patients and things like that. So that's the reason you'll see oftentimes a lot of assets on highways and things like that, is that's what they're trying to accomplish. Any questions about any of that? I got a couple of slides on the civil service hiring process, and then I'll stop, Matt, if you have any questions about that. So this is a civil service hiring process. So it starts with, we hire certified firefighter EMTs. So in the state of Texas, to be a certified firefighter, you have to also hold an EMT certification. That's an emergency medical technician. And that's like a mid-level of medical care. And the one notch above the EMT is a paramedic. So we hire them as an EMT, firefighter, certified firefighter. That takes them about 5 months to 7 months, depending on what schedule they go to get that before they're eligible to take our test. And then we have a Civil Service Commission meeting, and we call that meeting, and we set a test date. The commission has to set the test date at our recommendation. We usually set it 45 to 60 days out so that we can promote the test and let everybody know through marketing that we're going to be testing for positions. Working on a pre-application screening to kind of try to eliminate the one step of elimination of candidates so that we don't progress to the test and have to purchase tests for them and everything. So we're looking at a pre-application screening process that might just disqualify people for certain things before we actually go to the testing. And then they do the application and the background check, followed by a written test. So the test will be scheduled, they'll show up. We do a written test and a physical agility test on the same day. The physical agility test is what they call like a combat challenge. So they do one thing after the other, move to the next station, move to the next station. They'll climb aerials, they'll do Kaiser sleds where you hit something and try to move sleds. They'll go up and down stairs, they'll deploy hose, they'll drag dummies, and that's the physical part of it. They have to make a 70 on the written part of the test to move on. And every candidate is ranked on the written test. So they'll receive 1 through however many candidates pass as a number. So that's their ranking. Everything in civil service past that is just a pass-fail. So the ranking doesn't change. It's off the written test, and it stays that way through the whole process. And then if they pass the written, pass the agility, they move on to the next step, which is we do a psychological evaluation, a comprehensive psych eval, and a polygraph evaluation. And so they go down to Arlington and they go through that process. If they make it through that, they go to an interview panel, which is comprised of fire service personnel. They go through that interview process. If they make it through that, it's a drug test and a medical physical to make sure there's nothing medically they have that's going to prohibit them from doing the physical parts of the job, you know, into the future, because it is pretty rigorous physical element. Then they come to the chief's interview. Very seldom at that point, you can see everything they've gone through. So very seldom at that point does anything get overturned or changed by me. It sort of serves more as a, here's the expectations and welcome aboard. I have, in the time I've been here, that came to me and I turned back one person. So one time it's happened where it got to me and got through the process, and we sort of found some stuff out that was a little out of the ordinary, and we decided to pass on that candidate. That process takes about 4.5 months. And then after that, we hire them. Now, once we hire them, they get onboarded. They go to a 40-hour work week instead of a shift schedule where they get oriented to DFR. And that's really for the purpose of getting all the administrative stuff done and letting them work with everybody in the fire department. before they go on shift and just pretty much work with that work group. So we do that, and then if they're EMTs, either on a rotation, in totality, or some combination of the two, we'll send them to paramedic school. And they'll get 6 months worth of paramedic school, equates to about 7 to 10 months worth of actual before we're certified as a paramedic, because they take the test. It's got a pretty high fail rate, so it's not uncommon for them to fail it the first time, have to set it up the second time. There's usually a 30-minute time period between the time they can take those tests. So then they get their paramedic training, they'll get a shift assignment. Once that gets done, there's an evaluation period for their paramedic, their brand-new paramedic coming out. We acquaint them with our protocols and standing orders. And once that's completed, then they go into the firefighter piece of it, so they'll be evaled on our SOGs and our policies and procedures, make sure they're all acquainted with that. And once that eval period gets over, they're a full-fledged, independently functioning firefighter paramedic. It takes about 1 year and 5 months to get all that done. So from the time we look at scheduling a test to the time they are independently, turn them loose, we don't have to supervise them anymore, is about 1.5 years. So it's a long investment to get somebody on the rolls.
So, Chief,
Yes, ma'am.
quick question. I think I've seen the last few days that you've had 4 that have completed their first year. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so they've completed their year. Now, are they fully functioning, or are they?
So so there's a civil service probationary period that's sort of separate from what we do. So yeah, they're, with the fire side of it and all that, they're fully functioning. It depends, I mean, you can complete all your evals and on fire and the EMS side in a shorter period or longer period of time. About a year and 5 months is about the average. Because there's sometimes a delay even sending them to paramedic school. So they might not go like right when we hire them. So that's where that 1 year and 5 months comes in. This group, we sent the whole group at one time, all of them. So
On a fast track.
yes, so
Paramedic,
they're
okay.
a little bit ahead of what the normal schedule is. This was a little unique circumstance. So yeah, they are fully functioning at this point at 1 year, and they can independently do their thing. So, and we were really happy to see that, because that all worked out just perfectly. So, any other questions on that piece of it? It's a complicated process, and you can see why they're happy when they get to switch that helmet and get her after that first year and get that yellow helmet. Okay, next thing is the training. So this is the most important thing we do, short of making calls. This is second only to actual calls. And it requires a lot of planning, execution. There's just so many entities that have requirements on us that it's a little bit cumbersome trying to get through all of it. So the commission, as we talked about earlier, they have requirements. So we have to do continuing education for them. They do those random inspections every 2 years. One note on that used to be a checklist of things they would inspect, used to be about 1.5 pages long. Now it's 7 pages long, and that changed just recently. So their inspections, which used to last 2.5 to 4 hours, are now going into 2 days. So that's really good news. So we're working through some of that challenge too. So there's requirements from the commission, there's requirements from the fire service, the insurance service office, ISO, and they're outlined here in the slide for you. But there's just a lot of things, depending on your certification or whatever, that you're required to meet. And probably the most difficult one of all of those is that first one, which is 16 hours of company training. And the challenge there is if me and Judd are on a company and we've got to perform as a company to get company training credit. Now, if he goes on a month-long vacation in Alaska and I pair up with somebody else and get my company training, when he comes back, I'm fine. He's short, but I still have to train with him because he needs me to get his credit. So even though I'm fine and I can move on to other training and do other things, I can't yet until I catch him up. And so it's a really challenging piece of the puzzle to try to make all that stuff work. So we look for opportunities to do something that counts for ISO and also counts for the commission and maybe counts for something else, so we can kind of coordinate all that training. It's a kind of a hectic job, but that's what we try to do. And the EMS training, next slide, the EMS training, again, paramedics go through a certification validation every 4 years. So every 4 years, you have to prove up through dishes your CE. And they have areas that they, total is 144 hours, but there's specific areas, trauma, medical, pediatric, that you have to hit in order to meet that CE requirement. And then once you're under a medical doctor, sometimes your medical doctor that you're working under his license, he'll also have requirements. So he may require an advanced cardiac life support certification that's a separate advanced certification to perform under his medical license. So nearly all of them require something. They can require a pediatric specialty license, so there's that piece of it that we have to fold in there as well. And they do the medical side of it, there's a really extensive QA/QI process that's embedded into dishes and part of their regulatory stuff. So calls get reviewed, and they not only get reviewed by other paramedics, but the system has to include review by supervisors and even the medical control doctor. And so there's a metrics of what might kick a call up to that level of review, but the medical doctor is required to review those as well. Any kind of a deviation from those standing orders, so if it says give this much of a drug and you gave more, or anything like that, usually tags that call for somebody that's a supervisor or medical control to kind of look at it and make sure it's allowed, and it's oftentimes a good thing, but it's outside of that standing order, and the medical doctors usually allow that, but they allow it with a phone call. So you would call the medical doctor and go, okay, it says this, but I want to do this, and here's why. And you explain your case to him, and you're his eyes and ears, and he may say, yeah, do that. He may say no. You may not be able to get a hold of him, and you may have to make the decision on your own. So that process is set up to kind of help with all that. EMS constitutes, in DFR, it constitutes about 82% of our calls. And then we got the special operations, which is all the rescue, basically, is a good way to think about that. Aside from hazmat, that's pretty much what special operations is. In DFR, we do dive, swift water, and rope rescue. And that NFPA standard, and this is a liability thing, there's not really a requirement on our special operations, meaning we could have the certification, and nothing is saying that we have to do this many CE hours or anything like that. But again, it's a liability in case something goes wrong. And so there's some sort of best practice things that have to be done in order to ensure proficiency in that skill. And it's a very low frequency, high risk thing, so it's difficult to train for, because it's real easy to shove it to the back burner and go, well, we don't make many rope rescue calls, so let's do the medical CE, the fire CE, the ISO CE, and all this. And you sort of forget about it. It's the thing that gets shoved to the back burner. But if something does go wrong, those usually have catastrophic consequences, and so Julie's going to be involved, and it's not going to be good. So it's a challenge for us because, like I said, it's not a highly frequent thing, and it's easy to ignore, but it does require quite a bit of time to get proficient at it. So we try to do full-scale exercises which engage everything from the communication structure to maybe other resources from other agencies coming in to take care of that for us. Any questions about any of that?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
These specialty trainings that are required by the medical director, is that something you have to support out of your budget?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so, what does he or she do while you're in the process of acquiring these advanced skills?
Well, so they have a time on them, like, every 4 years or 2 years or whatever it is. So once you get it, they're good for a certain period of time, then they have to be renewed. There's a lot of opportunity, not always, but there's a lot of opportunity if you can work your schedule where you can get those classes done at no cost for the training. the class. Sometimes there's an overtime cost to that because we just can't, I mean, the complexity of our schedule, it's hard to, and when you have to have somebody come and instruct that class, they can't come and, if it's a 2-day class, they can't come for 2 days because we have 3 shifts. So if you want to do it firehouse schedule, they'd have to come for 6 days. So 2 days for this shift, 2 days for this shift, 2 days for this shift, which can be difficult. So a lot of times the class is free, so there's no expense there, but you may have to hire, you may have to bring people back overtime, yeah, to pay for it.
And so these 4 that have just completed their year and completed their paramedics, that they will have to now get these advanced skills?
So again, it's not a requirement by like law, just the medical director. So usually there's some grace given with, yeah, you just got finished with all that. So go ahead and do your thing, but have a plan, you know, to start addressing some of those things. So it's not always something that's as urgent, but it at the same time, we can't ignore it forever either, kind of thing, yeah. Any other questions about any of that? All right, let's go over real quick, just kind of, if you look on the slides, these little red things out to the side, those are things that NFPA tracks, and let me catch y'all up here. Those are things that NFPA tracks as benchmark times. So I just put them out there for your notes. But when we compare ourselves with national standards and things, those are the times that we look at, and it's within this metrics. So you get a phone call. The dispatch center gets a phone call. They're called the PSAP. So that's a public safety answering point. So that's the dispatch center. So the PSAP gets a call. And the dispatcher picks it up. They gather information on what kind of call is it. You know, is it going to law enforcement? Is it going to EMS? Is it going to fire? Where's it going? Once they get that done, they find out, okay, it's going to EMS. Now, what's wrong? And they start working through that process to get as much information as they can. Sometimes the calls are geographically identified, sometimes not, and so they have to find an address and work through that. Again, this is helped through the computer-aided dispatch software. And what that software does is, based on what that dispatcher says this call is, structured fire, it recommends, here's what you need to send. So up on her screen, or his screen, comes up what you need to send to this call. We may or may not have all that. And so then that's up to the dispatcher to move to the next level, which we build into that software, which is, okay, if this isn't available, what do I do next? And so they're just recommendations, right? Again, this is how dynamic this process is. They may, in this dispatch software, it may recommend Pottsboro. However, the battalion chief happens to know that Pottsboro's volunteer and nobody's there. They're all at a Grayson County Fire Chiefs meeting way away. And so he may change it, right? So but that's what happens. The call comes in, and dispatch takes care of finding out the information, lets them know help's on the way, and activates the resources. That period of time from the time the call hits until they activate the resources is the alarm handling time. And then they activate the resources. At the fire department, that means a tone comes out at the station. So you hear a tone. And then once the tone's sounded, and it's different for each station, and the firefighters can pretty much tell from the tone if it's their station or not. So if they're somewhere at training, not at their station, and a call comes in, they'll know from the sound of that tone if that's 2s, 3s, or 1s. But the tone comes out, and then the nature's given. So it's a structure fire, the address is given, and then the call notes. Like, yeah, they said they saw flames showing, or it's just smoke, or they don't know they smelled something, or whatever it is, those call notes will follow. And then the resources are starting to move that way. Oftentimes, because she's trying to get those resources pushed out as quickly as she can, or he can, there's more information that comes to you on your way. So she or he continues to talk and gather that information, and they'll share that. They can either share it on the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch, via just typing into the notes and say, hey, here's additions to your call notes, or they can get on the radio and let them know. So here they go. They're on their way. from the time that they check en route to go to that address and the time they arrive, that's a travel time. That's another benchmark. So now they're there, and they go there either code 1 or code 3. Code 1 is just no lights, no siren. Code 3 is everything. Some agencies, we don't do it yet, but they put priorities on calls, meaning 1, 2, or 3, depending on, I mean, you're gonna go code 3, but it's a way of, especially with EMS, of saying, how serious is this patient? And then when the first units get on scene, as far as like anything other than medical, they don't do it much for medical. We require a situation report, so they give a size up. So if it's a structure fire, they get on the radio and let everybody know what they're seeing. Now they're actually on scene and fire has eyes on whatever the problem is. They'll get on and let everybody know. And then they start their mitigation process, and that's their intervention time. And then they mitigate the situation, whatever the incident requires. And if it requires taking the patient, if it's a medical and it requires taking the patient to the hospital, there's a patient transport time that can be logged. So how long did it take from the time we left to the time we got there? And then once they're transported on the medical side, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, but they have to document the mileage from the scene to the hospital. So they're billing for medical care, but they have to document the mileage. So remember that, because we'll hit on that a little bit later. So then they go back to the station and wait for the next call, okay? So next call, after they get back, if it's a call of any significance, they'll debrief the call. So they'll get together and go, okay, here's what happened. A lot of times with both medical and fire, they kind of do a pit crew type of thing. So everybody will have an assignment, and you know, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And so they'll go over that. If somebody missed an assignment or did somebody else's assignment or whatever, they'll kind of go through that and debrief that. And then the biggest part is they document everything. They go back and do it while it's fresh in their mind. So they'll fill out all their paperwork and document that in our record management system, our RMS. They restock everything, clean everything, get everything back ready for service again. On the medical side or fire side, if it's a significant incident, a lot of times they'll stay out of service if possible to get that stuff cleaned up and back ready again. And then the other thing that happens after the call is oftentimes that call hit when they had training scheduled or something else. And so the battalion chief and the captains are constantly having to reprioritize and shift things to make sure that they get all the required stuff done. And if there was something on somebody's wish list, it might get pushed to the back burner so they can get that required things done first. So it's a little challenging, but that's what happens when we get those calls. Any questions about that? All right. What's in our future? So EMS is transitioning, okay? So right now it's under the Department of Transportation, which is why the mileage thing I told you to remember. So the EMS system actually gets to bill just like a trucking system with freight by the loaded mile. And that's why it's required to be documented, because they will bill for mileage. It's moving to Health and Human Services, and there's models out there that are already have already been implemented and are working very, very well. So there's a lot of push to try to change that model and put it where it makes a little more sense. When it goes to Health and Human Services, you know, that's Health and Human Services. That's the care you're given. So now the billing metrics is not really Department of Transportation overtoned, it's actual care given. So for instance, on Department of Transportation, if we go to somebody and don't transport them, oftentimes we lose a piece of billing, right? But with Health and Human Services, we could bill for whatever care we gave them. So if we happen to do something, it would make that billing a whole lot easier. So when that happens, EMS will function more like a triage model. So they're going to literally, you could see a call come to the PSAP that's a medical and get flipped to a medical dispatcher. Could be any one of a number of medical qualifications, but that medical dispatcher would then triage that call. What's your problem? What's the deal? Da, 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 da. And in these models, they are actually tending to their needs, but not necessarily often, not necessarily with an MICU, with a advanced life support ambulance. In some cases, they have Uber vouchers, they have vouchers to pharmacies, so they may send an Uber to pick them up and take them to their doctor's office. They may send them Uber vouchers and take them to the pharmacy. I mean, whatever is actually going to solve the problem, that's what they're going to do. It's a completely different model than what we have right now, and it's going to require. I think it's going to help the billing piece of it and allow you to capture more billing, but it's going to require a whole lot of infrastructure to get that working, and that's what we've seen in these models. In our future, recruitment. It will continue to be a challenge. We live so close to the Metroplex, and they are showing no signs of that completely outrageously competitive market. It's really very, very competitive, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. And so we'll always have that lure right in our back door. To give you an idea, Allen was the most recent job posting for a firefighter, EMT, without the paramedic incentive. They were only hiring paramedics, so if you backed what they had rolled in, it's a $78,000 a year job eligible for an 18-year-old kid. So it's with a $5,000 signing bonus. So they've even got the full-blown sports team stuff in there. So it's going to be an interesting challenge. So what we've seen with regards to that competitive market, if you look at this 3 years was sort of pre-COVID 3 years. Sherman lost 14 in the 3-year period. We lost 15. Gainesville, to our west, lost 3. Gainesville is fire only. So it gives you a little comparison of and a demonstration of what the Metroplex is after. They're after that paramedic is that's what we're really competing against. The other thing in our future, so fire is actually already way more dangerous than it was 20 years ago. Most of the fire service is set up in these pumpers and things that are attached to these pumpers to fight Class A combustibles, wood and paper. And way back then, and we can see it in our town, those older houses are wood and paper. But the newer ones, not so much. There are a lot more Class B, which is a more synthetic element, and it burns much faster and much hotter. So our gear is not prepared for that. Our tactics were not prepared for that. So that's going to be a real challenge moving forward, because it's not just the house, it's everything in the house. It's all getting extremely dangerous. What that does for us is it just means when something catches on fire and it's in a confined space, it blows up, goes down until somebody puts some oxygen in there, and then it explodes. And that period of time is shrunk way down. So oftentimes that situation in the past didn't exist until 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes after we got there. And now it's in existence before we get there. So it's causing some real challenges for us. The other thing is the fire service is now putting a whole lot more effort in prevention, and not just fire prevention. We've got requirements and best practices to look at community risk needs assessments and address community risk as a whole, holistically. So that includes any kind of, anything. I mean, we have risk of drownings, we have a lake, so it would encompass all of that. So there's challenges to the prevention department to try to address those things. Any questions about any of that? Just a couple of things the last 4 years, just to kind of give you an idea of what we've gotten accomplished, in no small part to council and our management team. I mean, it's been amazing when you kind of look back everything that's happened. But we completed a complete upgrade to our alerting system to become P25 compliant, which we weren't. We put status monitors, and that shows what resources are deployed and what's available at all the stations. We just recently redid Station 2. We replaced self-contained breathing apparatus that was at end of life. Our bunker gear completely all replaced. It was also at end of life. Our alerting system All the sirens in town, again, end of life. I found a newspaper article that announced our new warning sirens at the same time they announced this new 911 thing that we were going to start doing. So that gives you an idea how old those were. All replaced. We've gotten an engine, we got a truck on the way, and then we've got an ambulance, and we got another engine in the queue. So our fleet has received a huge update. Our training, to give you an idea how much progress we've made in training, the commission certifies all professional certifications within the state. So if you get a driver operator certification, a fire officer, an instructor, any of those certifications, advancing career certifications, between the years of 2006 and 2016, that's 10 years, Denison received 8 professional certifications. From years 2016 to 2020, we're at 76. So a lot more training, and we've leveraged grants to do a lot of that. Again, other than overtime expenses and a few fees, free as far as the classes go. So that's been a huge thing. We've updated our dive rescue certifications, swift water certifications, and rope rescue certifications, and implemented continuing education to try to maintain proficiency at those things. We've got a new record management system for the fire department. We also have staffing software for the fire department. We implemented a new patient care report for the EMS side, and we restructured admin to flatten out the org chart a little bit. We've got an implementation of the new firefighting techniques that help us deal with these fires that are burning hotter and faster. We've implemented procedures to put safety officers on incidents that have size and complexity to them so that we can better account for the safety of our team. A lot of cultural change, a completely changed an accountability model, and we've definitely introduced a little bit higher standard of service delivery, and the guys are thriving in that right now. If I was going to do the analysis for our department, the strengths, very professional, positive, and safety-minded members. They all want to improve themselves and do the right thing. We've got really innovative special operations teams and equipment, because that's, like I said, kind of a back burner thing, and it requires a lot of creativity to maintain them, and especially to move them forward. And we've been able to move them forward. We're not taking leaps and bounds, but we're making progress, and that's really difficult in this environment. We've got a very supportive city council and city management, and we've implemented modern firefighting techniques, which really addresses a lot of safety issues. Those are the strengths. The weaknesses, we still lack community engagement. We haven't been able to get where we want to in that area. We've got some people in prevention at this point, and I think we've kind of settled that division out, so I think we can look forward to some good community engagement there. We don't have a real insufficient fitness and wellness program. So to give you an idea what that is, we've got a grant right now, COVID interrupted it, to do firefighter physicals, a completely comprehensive cancer screening, ultrasounds, blood work, the whole deal. And we got it by a grant, we're gonna do it. But we weren't doing any firefighter physicals here, and that's been a requirement for some years. So after this, we're gonna implement some sort of a plan. We don't have to do them every year, but maybe, certain part of the department this year, certain part next year, to kind of shrink the number. They're not cheap, but they're very, very important, and we could sit here for another 30 minutes or 45 minutes sharing stories about what that's done for firefighters, because it's absolutely saved some of them's life.
Chief, will your grant still be there?
Pardon?
Will your grant still be there when COVID is over?
Yes, ma'am, we checked with
You'll
them.
be able to pick it back up?
Yeah, they just gave us an extension, so that was an AFG grant we did a long time ago and got it. And so, yeah, they've been really, really good to work with, and so they're all good with that. Other weaknesses, lack of resiliency to rumors. I think we're all kind of guilty of that, but we've kind of identified that as an issue that we want to deal with, and we're taking strides to kind of make sure that we vet things and don't let those rumors fester. And so we've got that listed as something we're working on improving. And effective communication throughout the department. That's always a challenge with the shifts. Again, What we talked about with training, if we want to do a class, you know, somebody's got to come 3 days. And so there's challenges there. And I will tell you that there is no way that any business would set up shifts if they wanted to start a business and their effective communication was a priority. Because I have to say something to a shift today, and I have questions, and so I answer them. And then the next shift, I try to say the same thing and then add the questions, and then I have more questions. And then the third day, they get a completely, because I'm exhausted by now, and they get a completely different, no matter how hard I try, it's just a different story. And so after all that exercise, then my 2 assistant chiefs, Mark and Aaron, have to go back and hit the stations, as do I, and try to clean up all the, you know, well, he said this, no, he said that, no, he meant this. So it's just very, very challenging. So we try to work through that. Opportunities we have some significant opportunities if we can pull it off to leverage regional partners and increase some service delivery efficiencies in this county. There's a lot of opportunity there. Engage the community to educate about emergency service delivery, similar to what we're doing right now. There's a lot of aspects to our business that the general public's just unaware of, and that's something we want to try to address. Increase community engagement and the risk reduction like we talked about earlier. And we want to partner with city leaders and really get a little bit more involved in community enrichment and getting behind and lending our resources to things that would benefit the city as a whole, not necessarily fire-related. Threats, number 1, proximity to DFW, fire and EMS market, and it's not going to go away. I'll give you an idea, and you know Philip Hightower. When I started in Sherman in '94, one of the things he told me, he asked me if I was going to stay in Sherman, and I said, well, yeah, I don't know, you know, I've just got a job here. Yeah, I'm staying. And he said, because we're a training ground for the Metroplex, and that was in 1994. So it's not going to go away, and we're going to be forced to deal with it, and I think we've got some innovative solutions to try to do just that. So we look forward to addressing that threat in the future. Declining EMS collection revenue is a challenge for everybody right now. Mutual aid cooperation with the county, and that has to do with mostly everything around us is volunteer, and it's difficult to know what you're going to get. And then when you get something, it's Pottsboro sending an engine, and I really don't care if the engine is coming. I want to know how many people are on the engine. And so there's challenges there that we'll address. And then the last one, I guess we fixed tonight, radio interoperability and radio coverage deficiencies. Not yet? We're close? I'll just jumped ahead there, didn't I? Yeah, so that's a challenge for the county, city too, but also the county. As we grow, and to give you an example, when we have a fire, we like to go to a channel and operate the fire on that channel, not the channel that we get dispatched on. So that way, if somebody else needs to go on a call, dispatch needs to call Sherman to come in, they can do it on that primary channel, and we can operate over here on this fire channel, and it's recorded and it's monitored by dispatch. So if they hear somebody say something in their nice little quiet cubicle that I didn't hear out on the noisy fire ground, they can go, command, did you receive? They're looking for this. You know, it's just, and it's required in best practices, and we don't have enough frequencies to get that done. So we operate fires on a TAC channel that's like a walkie-talkie, so nobody can hear it, just us. Sometimes we can't hear it. That's a significant safety issue, but it takes a lot of money to fix it. And we've tried to get frequencies in our proximity to Oklahoma. We have to clear a frequency that doesn't interfere with anything Texas and also doesn't interfere with anything Oklahoma, and there's just not any left. So that requires a different set of repeaters and equipment and all that to try to take one frequency and group it into 20. And it's just a lot of money. So I applaud you guys for addressing that and moving forward with that, because that'll be a huge, huge safety thing for us, and we appreciate it. That's all I've got. We're to the end. Do you have any questions? I know there's probably a lot more that you would like to know, so please, if you do have any questions or any concerns or anything comes to you from the public, please shoot me an email and let me know, and we'll get those answered as quick as possible. Because like I said, we really want to try to get the public educated a little better on what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. That was a report only and requires no action from the Pursuant to Chapter 551 Texas Government Code, the council reserves the right to convene in executive sessions from time to time as deemed necessary during this meeting to receive legal advice from its attorney on any posted agenda item as permitted by law, or to discuss the following: deliberations regarding economic development negotiations pursuant to Section 551.087, update by Denison Development Alliance on pending negotiations and projects. In order to be able to maintain social distancing within the council, we ask all of you to clear the council chamber so that we can go into executive session. The time is 7:55, and we are now in executive session. The time is 8:31, and the Denison City Council returns to regular session. Update by Denison Development Alliance on pending negotiations and projects, and no action taken. With there being no further business to come before this body, the time is still 8:31, and we are adjourned. And no pizza, Robert.